It's all about signs. Well, of course, signs do matter. Run a stop sign and you may regret it. Miss the arrow that points to where you turn to get to where you want to go, and you'll end up somewhere you've never been, and you certainly may not want to be. But once upon a time, people took signs a lot more seriously. They saw them everywhere, and they interpreted them as a key to what was going to happen. When the Gospel of Mark talked about how the world was going to end, it described all kinds of signs. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. It's like farmers watching the signs that the seasons are about to change. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as the branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. Or as my grandmother used to say, a ring around the moon means rain tomorrow. Signs, portents, omens. Our ancestors looked for them everywhere. No wonder this morning we hear the crowds with Jesus talking about signs. What sign are you going to give us then, so that we may see it and believe you? They've come looking for Jesus because they're wondering, and they're wondering because Jesus has just fed a crowd of 5,000 people with 2 loaves and 2 fish that a little child gave him. Of course, that's quite a feat in itself, but they want more. And Jesus isn't happy at what they're up to because he's afraid that all they're thinking about is how all those people were out in the countryside, miles from the nearest 7-Eleven, and they were hungry, and they ate until they couldn't eat anymore, and there were still leftovers. So what does it mean? Many years ago, I got into trouble for repeating in a sermon, not at Christ Church, what I'd read about from a modern New Testament scholar who was commenting on this story. Everybody, probably including us, thinks that what Jesus is up to is showing the crowd what he can do, like some magician who makes things appear and disappear, as if the sign Jesus is showing is just about power. Look what I can do. That scholar suggested that there wasn't necessarily anything particularly miraculous about what Jesus did. Probably lots of the people who'd gone out on that summer afternoon to listen to Jesus had brought along lunch, but they weren't about to let anybody else know. And then a little child comes up to Jesus and offers him what he had, 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. And what happened? One gesture of generosity from that child triggers what? Guilt? More generosity? Both? And one by one, the crowd starts opening their picnic baskets and sharing what they have with their neighbors. And surprise, there's more than enough for everybody. The fact is, what happened that afternoon is a powerful sign, however it happened, but not necessarily the kind the crowd was looking for. Jesus himself told us that when he did those remarkable things the Gospels are full of, he was creating signs, signs of God's reign. God's reign, which is the way things would be if God's will, God's dream, came true. For me, the signs that we see when a crowd gets fed are not so much about what Jesus can do and we can't, as they are about what things would be like if God's dream came true. So what did the crowd miss when they didn't get the message, what Jesus was telling them when that crowd got fed? Well, first of all, I think they missed what he was telling them about God and hunger. In Jesus' time and in our own time, there are hungry people in the world, lots of hungry people. There are hungry people in Gaza. There are hungry people in Ukraine. And there are hungry people in Poughkeepsie. And one of the questions you might ask is, are people hungry because God wants them to be hungry? Is the misery that has haunted this planet for as long as we can tell somehow God's will? I think what Jesus did that afternoon wasn't just giving people a snack till they got home. He was telling them the same thing he told them when he gave a poor family's wedding reception more wine than they could ever drink just when they were running out. Our God, the real God, the God of Jesus, is a God of abundance. The planet we live on is not a planet of scarcity. Even with all the crimes we commit against it, the earth is still lush and green and producing plenty for everybody to eat their fill. If there are hungry people in Gaza, if there are hungry people in Poughkeepsie, it's not God's fault. It's the fault of a human family that doesn't see or doesn't care what God intends for us. It's the fault of a human family that is frightened that there won't be enough. It's the fault of a human family that wants more than its fair share. And it's the fault of a human family that still has not figured out that God's intention, God's dream, is for a world where nobody goes hungry. The prophets told us that when God's dream comes true, it will be like a banquet. And Jesus' own people told the story of how when their ancestors were starving in the desert, God gave them what they needed to make it to their homeland. And for one afternoon, people could see it for themselves because 5,000 people ate until they couldn't eat anymore. Our God longs for a world where there are no hungry people because our God is a God of abundance. And I think that crowd might have gotten another sign that afternoon if they'd been paying attention. They would have gotten the message from Jesus that generosity isn't just something that's nice to remember at Christmas. Generosity is the key to changing what needs to be changed. Feeding that crowd, however it happened, depended on one child's generosity. Think about it. One little kid comes up to Jesus with some bread and some fish, and 5,000 people go home and don't need supper. Generosity is one of the things that happens when people are touched by Jesus, by what he did and by what he said. Paul said that being generous is one of the gifts God's Spirit gives us. But of course, that doesn't mean we're going to accept the gift. We can always say no. But when people say yes, when we choose to be generous, things happen. Things change. People can be changed. And one more thing. Think about who it was who started the process that changed everything. It wasn't one of the temple officials who offered the bread and the fish to Jesus. It was a little boy. It wasn't someone important, someone used to being asked for money, someone with a reputation as a benefactor. It was a little boy. I wonder if that was a sign the crowd got, or if they missed that one too. God can use the smallest gifts, the gifts from the people nobody notices, to make things happen, to make things change. What are 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish among so many? Well, a lot more than you might think. And so it is with what we have to offer, what we have to share. We can never know how even the smallest of gestures can change the way things are into the way things might be. God's reign doesn't happen like a Hollywood blockbuster. It happens when ordinary people are moved to do ordinary things, and amazing things happen. I don't know how Jesus gave that crowd so much to eat they couldn't eat anymore, and I don't need to know that. What I do need to know is that God means for things to be different, and that generosity is one of the keys to making things different, and that nobody is too small, too insignificant to have a part in it. Those are the things I want to notice. Those are the signs I want to remember. I hope you do too.